I'm going to try something a little different in the way that I do this here. And uh, basically, I'm just kind of trying to give some examples. I'm looking at how I can get the words can look and make more sense with what I'm trying to show as I give different props. I have these fruit. We're going to do the solar system in fruit today. So yeah, I don't have a studio. I'm kind of like really low budget, keep things very practical and so on. But this is also a very different kind of video in that I'm going to be doing not really a review about another video or about other people. It's that people will share things with me. And I was recently sent a video from Lorie Ladd, somebody that I like her work, her presentation. I would call her a spiritual leader. Very, very positive young lady. And she had a Dr. Larry Palevsky on, and who gave a wonderful presentation in his part, about examining the COVID-19 vaccine. And then another guy, Damiene, I guess his name is Wynne or Wynne, Wynne, and he was saying a lot of things in his perception about how he feels things going on. And that's wherein came a question for me from some people like, hey, could you kind of translate this guy, And so in looking at that, in looking at his video, I understand where he was coming from. And he and I have very different ways of presenting, our thoughts on things. And I'm someone who, I like to keep things simple. I'm not saying that he didn't, because um, he has a lot to say. And in those types of videos, as I know from personal, it's hard to get all your thoughts into that one segment, without getting into really long pieces of explanations. So I have a couple of things that I was going to explain in notes that people had sent or questions and so on. So I'm just going to go through them. And by absolutely don't mean any belittling or disrespect to these people, because I think, like I said, look, if you look up Lorie Ladd and examining the COVID-19 vaccine, it was a really nice video, very practical. A talk about sovereignty, very practical, complete thoughts by the doctor, and she shared. And then with, Damiene was given this more um, spiritual aspect, I guess you could say. He said he works with a lot of medical people. Yeah, I do too, so I can understand the mix that you can get in there, matching these two fields. And by the way, I really admire people who are associated with the medical industry who can step away from that, the guarded perimeter, and give their spiritual interpretations and so on with that. So one of the things that Damiene was talking about, like when he says the creators, and we are creators, something that would come in is, excuse me. So we do have that God self. We want to call it the goddess self. And when I'm talking to my Christian uh, brethren, it's like, look, if we want to believe in a story of creation, and God breathed the breath of life into Adam when he was still clay, then we would have to say God's the father, and of course then the earth would then be the mother. So we have two very distinct traits of both parents. We have our physical body, and then, that's very obvious, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But then we also have, our spiritual or godlike presence. If we just wanted to take just that, uh, I'm careful, I want to say mythology, but you guys know where I'm coming from with this. That would be the logic of it, right? So you could have one parent's an artist, another one's an engineer. Children would have similar characteristics, maybe more of one aspect of the parent and maybe more of another. And that's just normal the way that works. Well, then why wouldn't we be these not quite omnipotent, but very powerful creators in our own divine right? So I'll go along with that. So I agree with him completely in that, in that we're these, uh, we have that God state, that creative state, and of course we do have some of that power from one or both of our parents like that. And on the Earth part, the Earth's very, very prolific. You know, life just keeps coming back here. It's a wonderful planet to be on, especially the water part. It's not too often places have water like we do here. So let's look at like the creators, and then after that, the veils. You know, and I hear so much of this from the New Age scene where people say, "Oh yeah, the veils are getting thinner now." You know, the veils, you know, are this figuratively metaphor for a separation between something or an obstruction between something. But me and my practical mind says, okay, well, it's a veil. Is it kind of like a curtain? You know, a tapestry? Is it like hanging from something? Or where's the connection part? Because in a veil, we definitely have this is this end and here's this end over here. There's a limit there. And we know that. So where is the veil? And what sourced it? Where did it come from? You know, that's me and my just logical mind. For those of you that aren't familiar with me, yeah, I served a traditional shamanic apprenticeship and had different mythology from the Celtic side, Native American side, and all that. But over the years, over the last 40 some years, I really appreciate physics and science a little bit more because metaphysics and physics should be working hand in hand. And if you have a shamanic a theory about something, a spiritual theory, if it's true, there's a an example already existing on the physical plane. So my whole thing with these veils and all that, I just don't go along with that. Now, I haven't talked to Mr. Wynne or Damiene, and he might have a completely different explanation of it, and I'd be loving to hear it. And by the way, I do really appreciate when people share these videos with me because I love to hear other critical thinking out there in the spiritual leadership arena. So many times we listen to people that's throwing out new age cliches and quick explanations without any foundation or a clear explanation about that, you know, that metaphysical metaphor that they're throwing out. The fields, you know, people are talking about the fields, you know, of embodiment, the fields of the God state, the fields of something. I look at that too. It's like, okay, where's the perimeter? Where is it? Explain that. You know, explain more of the where does this start and where does it end and what does it do and things like that. So, what are your thoughts on Mark Plazio's work if you are familiar with him? I'll have to get back on that. You know, send me some comments, but I'm gonna keep my train of thought on here. So, with that part of what he was talking about, sorry, I couldn't really be able to explain that, but you know, he seems like a fairly popular guy. I would suggest writing him and getting him to give a more in-depth explanation of it. The God state and the creator state, yes, I can completely agree with some of his points that we do have that. You know, we, like I said earlier, if we're going to have that divine nature, obviously we're going to share a little bit of that divine omnipotent power to some degree, just because we were created. When I say created, you know, I'm a strong believer in evolution too, but I also see and appreciate the divine consciousness, architecture, and engineering that goes into creating a species. And evolution is just awesome like that. When you start looking at the science of how we evolved throughout the earth, or all the different species, how they can go changing from, let's say, from caterpillar to butterfly, the amphibians, and so on. So all of that, I would, the God state, yeah, I can go along with that. Do I believe in the God creating it like you hear in the Bible? And I've read that front to back in three languages. So, no, I wouldn't quite agree with that. Um, but I like the scientific approach. Radiate frequency. People, please search YouTube. There's wonderful scientific based YouTube videos on the differences of frequencies, resonance, vibrations, natural frequencies, forced vibrations, I mean, all of it. It can be an expansive field and along with the combinations thereof. Please, if you want to pursue your knowledge and studies in metaphysics, please study these things and their differences. Here, let me give you a quick example. If you have a glass and the singer, is can hit the note that basically breaks the glass, they're basically matching the frequency of that glass, and that's what does that. Okay, so that should stimulate a little bit of your thought process right there. Going back to source. Okay, well, define source. I've heard so many different variations of this. Where's a source? If it was the Big Bang Theory source, then we're talking about that little part that's the center of the universe. It went boom, and expanded, and therefore the universe is still expanding, and galaxies are still expanding within that. So again, always look for the complete thought. Again, this was an excellent video. But when we're hearing Damiene in some of his phraseology, it does, for the layman or the person getting into the shamanic journey, their spiritual journey, I would suggest that he get a little bit more clear on these things and but here's where we, people like he and I, or Lorie and I, and the good doctor here that I really respect his work, we count on you people to give us some questions, and it helps us in a way, because every time that we have to explain what we do or how we're thinking about things in a different way, so a different group of people or a different culture. For instance, like I work in a lot of places where I don't speak the languages. This is a real normal thing for me. So I have to really think about a different way to explain my perceptions, my work, my realities, so the translator has something different to work with. And if you're only used to speaking English to an English speaking crowd, you're going to say it that one way. But when you're explaining yourself in different ways, and I'll also do this in different languages myself, I know that some things just aren't translated that well. If you have a time factor, like from this, when I do my work from English to Hungarian, there's a huge time difference in the translation part. So and a lot of professional translators can really just skip over some important details. So I have to learn to really explain myself in different ways in segments that could easily be translated for the cultures that I speak with. So, and especially when we're getting into terms like radiate, embody, frequencies, resonance, vibrations, you get into those aspects that are translated into different languages, and you get sometimes you'll get a completely different picture than what you want to transfer to the other person. So going back to source, so there's one of them. So again, it's like, where is the source? And going back to from where, and so where are you? See, all these things. Something, by the way, people, I like to triangulate, meaning I like to think of something from different positions. That helps me really verify where I'm coming from when I speak to people. Triangulation is great in navigation, same principles. It lets you know really where you are personally in your speech and the information you're giving out in relation to your environment. Okay. Um, Activated bodies. So before they were activated, were they inactive? I mean, activated from what? And hopefully I'm going to get into a little part about that. Would I use that term? No. When people say about activated bodies, I just wouldn't go there in that way. I would use more terms like heightened awareness. I don't really believe in using the phrase like raising your vibrations, because or raising your frequency. All right, because when we look at things like UHF, VHF, as ultra high frequency, very high frequency, all these other things, and these things we know can be destructive, but the Earth has a very low frequency, lower vibrations, as does most things that are, peaceful in life. 3D going into 5D and then back. So he gave a good, interesting description of how he would see people in a 3D, so they say a third or three-dimensional reality, and then going into a five-dimensional. Well, what happened to four? You know, and by the way, let me go ahead and explain that a little bit on a four-dimensional. So let's say this was a cube, okay, and this is a three-dimensional. But let's say it was a cube. It was like a square. The four-dimensional would be a piece like this, a square on every side. Okay, then that would take it to your fourth dimension. And then the fifth, of course, you're going, and it makes different geometrical configurations, which also vibrate, resonate, and all that differently. But that's another really extensive subject. So that's why, I wouldn't kind of like throw that out there like that. So he made a comparison, where he was saying, so he would watch these people in what he calls his system. So I'm just going to take it that that's how he operates. And they were making these transitions. And then after the vaccine came in, they went back a ways. Now, this is something that I can watch people go through different things, and they either relationships will do it, interactions with people, different integrations with geomantic sites, sacred sites, ceremonial sites, and the polaric values, the program values, and that can have people just kind of like go back in like a regression, kind of a mind frame. Vaccine turns off embodiment is what he was saying. Again, going back to Damiene, I can see that. I really can. And if we're going to go into embodiment, meaning taking the information that comes in and integrating that into your personal physical body, and so you can utilize this information or skill set, on the physical plane in your everyday life, shamanic life, and so on. And yes, especially if something's messing with your DNA, I mean, the really genetic foundation of who you are is like going into, fine machinery or fine electronics and just doing that one thing. This is why when guys are working on computers, they like to ground themselves. They don't want that one piece of static electricity going through there and shorting out the system. In the Marine Corps, I went through a thing with explosives ordnance disposal. Like when you drop a bomb and it doesn't go boom, we go out and pick it up and find out why. But static with electricity was a constant awareness check. You'd never know if you made a mistake. So, but at the same time, we are electrophysiochemical units. So there's so many things that can have our moods go up, have our brain waves work in different ways, have our spirituality, which is connected to our physiology, work, and a little bit of a frequency here and there, a little bit of a chemical change, and then all of a sudden we start to act like a different being, operating from a different consciousness. So yeah, I can see years. I got out of the Marine Corps when I was 20. I'm 62 now. Haven't had any shots yet and won't get them, because when I got shots in the Marine Corps, I got deathly ill all the time. A lot of us were just like down, and the Marine Corps doesn't care. You're going to still get up and run and do whatever you need to do. Contract to the Anunnaki. I don't know. I tried looking it up, and these are these things, like I said. So this is why some people will share a video with me and like, what's this guy talking about? And I'm not going to even go there on that. Why are things, and this is something that Lorie had said, like, why are things happening at this time, at this particular time? This is really good. This is a really good point. And this is something that I have brought up in the past when I talk about alignments. Anytime we had these really significant alignments, the government puts out these huge distractions and making a real effort to take people's minds off of things. In a recent video, I talked about how humanity made these great technological advances back in its primitive time during these different celestial phenomenons that were occurring. And people were a lot closer in nature then. So at this time, here in the next couple of days, we get these alignments of the planets. We're going to use our watermelon sun, and the different other planets like the potato planet, the apple planet, and the little tangerine kind of citrus planet. So basically these things, let me kind of adjust this a little bit so you guys can see more of that. So you're going to have this kind of a alignment on different parts of the different sides of the sun. So as you're doing that, you have this gravitational pull. So let me just start off with a couple, all right? And let's talk about it should be Mercury because it's red, Mars because it's red, right? So there's this term, and God, I wish I could remember it. My science mind just leaves me sometimes. When the gravitational field between two, have a good live with Ellie, thank you. Uh, when the gravitational field between two bodies cancel each other out, okay? So in other words, let's say that the gravitational pull for the Earth, it's not really a pull, it just kind of warps space and has it roll in, is somewhere right around here. So this point was where the Earth's gravitation or gravity and then the sun's gravity, it might be this neutral point. So it'd be an excellent place for satellites and whatever, because it doesn't have to burn a lot of fuel to stay away from the Earth or stay away from the sun, okay? So we could also call this like subconscious mind and conscious mind, because the brain is so fast, it can pull in all this, millions of bits of information and stimuli a second, but it pushes a lot of it out because it doesn't really agree with what's the base here, the things we learn as, the very, very young human being. So just like in tides, you're going to have this force, so that's pulling on this, okay? So now bring in the moon, okay? So the moon's doing this, and then so when the moon gets into this point, for instance, the moon's being pulled by the sun and the earth. All right, so it's getting stretched a little bit, kind of elongated and depleted on the top part. So when this stretches this way, I don't want to squish it, but make it oblong. But then what happens is this becomes a little bit less on the bottom, and this part becomes out more. Okay, so that's kind of like a little bit of less, focus on the crown chakra, a little bit less on the root chakra, and then we're somewhere in the middle. Okay, so that's a lot to happen to someone. So when the moon is moving around, like this, now we have a little bit of a different pull. So we have a tide on the earth from the moon, and we have more on the sun this way. Then we have different types of eclipses and so on. So these things we know for a fact from just our own human history, they can affect us. And we know that sometimes our mind, our spirituality, and so on is affected by that too. And as the planets are turning, then it's also wobbling like this, which makes our seasons. So then the next part is, what if, now this is no longer the moon, it's another planet. Now you have this happening, okay? Oh, so no, let me go back to that. In this space here, okay, is often a good comparison for the average person's spiritual journey. It's not really part of the everyday thing of the world, and it's not really part of like the mass consciousness of everyday society. So it's somewhere in the middle. It's a nice, easy place to maneuver and operate, not too much stress. And a lot of people will get into their spiritual journey and find this really easy place to navigate, and that's about all they want to go. And that's okay, that's their right, no one needs to be forcing them. In shamanism, we have a saying, it's okay to take people where they don't want to go, It's not okay to take people where they cannot go. In other words, sometimes the learning and the shifting part of shamanic apprenticeships might be uncomfortable, and it's just out of your comfort zone, out of your into the unknown zone and so on. But that's okay because you know the person can handle that. All right, you don't teach people to swim by just throwing them off a bridge into a river, but you can push them into deep water if you're swimming right beside them. Right, that's how I taught my daughters how to swim. So now imagine, so you got the sun, the earth, and then out in the solar system, you have these other bodies. So come on over here, son. See, right? And then come here, planet. So now, and the potato planet, can't forget the potato planet. So now you have a lot of gravitational stuff. Now this little comfortable place over here is going to get pulled. It's getting pulled as this planet and this planet is starting to come into an alignment. And I'm sorry, they're all coming in from one direction, going like this, and at different speeds. And because of their distances farther out, this little comfortable place over here, now, whether they want to or not, they're going to feel that shift. They're going to feel that gravitational pull. And it's not just there, but you have this happening on the other side of the sun as well. So you have all these other little aspects here, all this gravitational. So when it really gets lined up, starting on the 21st into like the 24th and 25th, that's a big push for the spiritual growth, for deprogramming and all this other stuff. Whereas, like Damiene was saying, for the activation, of embodiment and so on. So that's kind of like an outside, more detailed view of what's really happening. So at the same time, the governments look at this and go, okay, we really got to shut this down. We really got to get people's focus on us, our fear and guilt and shame and stuff like that, and stop this, because all of a sudden they'll wake up and we won't have a job anymore, which is real okay with me because I can't think of anything more non-essential than a politician. So I hope that made sense. Anyways, my little fruit solar system and all that. So, the last times that something like this happened, we had this wonderful planetary alignment to the galactic center. And that would have been a wonderful time when people, the world leaders said, hey, don't go to work, don't go to school, go out to the forest or the desert or the beach or whatever, and just chill out and think about life, think about world peace and sustainability, think about all the cool things that we should be focused on as, humanity. No, the American war machine went out and started the first Gulf War. Yay. Imperialism. And of course, we missed that. So the other one that happened, and this is more of a pulse than an alignment. See, the government bodies and their shamanic versions, they can see the celestial things coming in the future. The earth pulses, they can't. All right, those are things that only real intuitives, the shamans, the real empaths, they'll feel it coming. And they'll get the pictures of what to do, things to focus on, and so on. But then when those things happen, it just surprises the governments. And the last one was 2 Julys ago, and people were really shedding their programming almost instantly, just going, hell with it, I don't care, put me in, I want to play, and really rolling with it. And then I can see the government's like, oh, damn. Okay, we can't have this happening next year just before this alignment. No one will pay attention to us. So, so that's kind of the answer of why they're going to push this through at this time, because they really want these vaccines going. Remember, the emergency use authorization, that's how they can push an experimental vaccine onto people without federal approval, because they say, oh, there's no other way to us to deal with this pandemic that you can have a 99.98% survival rate from. So you have that high survival rate, but you need this emergency use authorization to push it through. Okay, so Miss Ladd, I appreciate your your candor on that one. So programmed, he made a good point. We're programmed not to ask questions about things, and this is something that I've said too. It's like everybody's got this thing. It's like, shh, the doctor's talking. Okay, can't ask any questions. See that PhD next to his name? You gotta shh. No bullshit. Ask all the questions you want. In this, I want to bring up some kind of sad facts. And this is what we're up against as human beings who want to grow, learn, evolve, and help other people do the same thing. It wasn't very long ago, just in the last couple of years, there was a rash of naturopaths, homeopaths, people who used to work for pharmaceutical companies that had unfortunate and very untimely deaths under extremely suspicious conditions. People who were getting ready to release reports, release names and things like that, and all of a sudden died. People who said, by the way, I'm not suicidal. If anything happens to me, it was by somebody else's hand. Well, we recently had that just happen within the last couple of days. It was Brianna Vaughn, who worked for Merck, and I think it was the learnabouttherisk.org site that she put out, and was just recently murdered. People, all you people that just blindly trust the pharmaceutical industries, blindly trust the person wearing the white doctor coat, all that, and you can't look at this with a little bit of suspicion saying, this is what drug lords do. Wow, that kind of fits, doesn't it? Yeah, this is exactly what drug lords do. They just kill off the opposition, and they don't care if you don't like it or not. They think they're sending out the message like, hey, you better be afraid of us. Yeah, I guess that's one way of doing it, but we know that you have good intentions for us. We're real clear about that. So that's about all I got. These are my little notes about what people have asked and so on. But again, check out that video from, like I said, Lorie Ladd, Dr. Larry Palevsky, exploring the COVID-19 vaccine. And you get so the doctor has some excellent stuff, about that government legalized mafia. Indeed, yeah, unfortunately it is, but so I have to get ready for a live video here shortly with Ellie Glazvalle. She's also on Healers of Earth on Instagram and YouTube. You guys check her out sometime. She's a shamanic apprentice, and by the way, she has been doing some awesome work in her readings. Stay tuned. You guys can look up on Shamanic Woman. I do a lot of work with her too. She's a shaman that served an apprenticeship. Check her things up here on YouTube on my channel. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I am definitely on shadow ban with Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Fascist Book. I'm trying to look for other platforms, so yeah. And we have to look at this too. If you have a good idea about something, you don't have to force people to do it. If your idea is bad and people talk about it, you shouldn't have to censor, negative stuff or people who have contrasting views. That's not who we are as Americans. And Facebook, Instagram, YouTube are acting very un-American. They're public platforms. They're forums, open forums. They're not publishers. They can't be held accountable for their stuff. Okay, so they're just doing this, the leftist agenda and so on, and and yeah, and that's that. So anyways, I gotta get going. So I'll catch you guys later.